Every Thursday, let's get skin to it with dermatologist Dr. Sandy Skotnicki and personal stylist and beauty enthusiast Marlo Sutton for a new episode of Skin to It, where we guide you through the maze of skincare and cut through that noise to help you achieve your healthiest skin. Skin to It, a podcast brought to you by Bioderma. Welcome to Skin to It, your guide to healthy skin. I'm Dr. Sandy Skotnicki, board-certified dermatologist.
And I'm Marlo Sutton, personal stylist and beauty enthusiast.
And we got dressed up today for the beauty episode. Yes.
All in pink.
All in pink.
I've got my, I was just in Paris and I got these lovely, you can't see them, but fish charms.
Do they mean something?
Yeah, they're for luck.
They're for luck.
Yes.
And I'm wearing a Canadian designer, Olympia Gayot, who's now designing for J. Crew. She's Canadian and we know her. So shout out to Olympia.
Yeah.
And you look lovely as always, Doris.
I'm wearing accurates.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
Well, we haven't introduced you yet.
So. Yes. Sorry. So in today's episode, we are discussing what makes something beautiful with our very special guest, Dr. Doris Day.
And I'm gonna introduce Doris. And Doris is a very busy physician, very sought after, and we appreciate your time. So Doris, on her, I think it's her Instagram, it says New York City board-certified dermatologist, aesthetics expert, science-backed skincare designer, author, radio talk show host, wife, mother, and world traveler. I love that. I think that's very succinct. But to give a little bit more in depth to Doris, she's a board-certified dermatologist in New York City. She specializes in laser, cosmetic, and surgical dermatology. She holds a clinical assistant professorship at New York University Medical Center. And she's also affiliated with Lenox Hill Hospital. She regularly engages in clinical trials. She was on the product development for Olay Professional X line. And she's recognized as a sought-after expert in cosmetic dermatology. She often makes frequent appearances, and I've seen her on the Today Show and Good Morning America. And Doris and I met and hit it off in Croatia years ago at a Bioderma meeting when we have both published our books at the same time, mine being Beyond Soap, yours being Beyond Beautiful. So welcome, Doris. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. First of all, I'm so happy and honored to be on with you both. And Sandy, you and I, we go back. That was an amazing trip, but your name comes up all the time. I know so many Canadians and there's so many that I work with. And every time your name comes up, everybody is always proud to know you. You have like the most incredible reputation within our field, both in terms of your skill set, but also your kindness and your contribution. So it's really great to be honored to talk with you. So,
well,
I had so much fun meeting you. I felt like we had just an immediate sort of kindred sort of connection. So I love that too.
Yeah, and we had good titles for our book.
Yeah, I know. I love that. I love that. Absolutely loved reading your book, Doris. Thank you. It's so beautiful. I love the title. And I especially, right off the bat in your intro, I connected to it right away. A couple of stories, you talk about your sister's illness and death at a young age and your connection with your father and his inspiration to you. So can you maybe talk to us a bit about writing the book?
Yeah, I actually became a journalist before I was a physician, and my dad was very upset about that. He was like, "You are never going to be a doctor. This is the biggest mistake." And I said, "No, Dad, I'm going to do that, but I know that I wouldn't do the journalism after." And it was really because of my sister that I wanted to become a medical reporter, to really write about hospice care and quality of life over length of life, because watching her go through her illness, my sister was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 14 and passed away just before 15, and I was 16. And it was the illness itself was horrific enough, but it was the pain and the suffering before the dying that was so difficult, and the fact that the conversations around it were so tough. And over the years, I really learned that length of life, we have not that much choice over. I mean, some choice, but quality of life and how we lived, we have a lot of choice over. And so I kind of wanted to tell her story as many times as I could, in as many ways as I could, as I grew and learned to understand it better. And really, as a dermatologist, as a physician, I'm all about longevity medicine. And that part I get from my dad. So my dad always said that we should all die young at an old age. And he got hit by a car at the age of 91. He walked 8 miles every day, was walking in Manhattan, his favorite city where we live, in front of his favorite store, Saks Fifth Avenue, who's next to the door. And a car came up off the sidewalk, lost control, and hit one person, and that was my dad. But he actually survived the accident. And I go into detail about that whole time period and how I navigated it. But he showed me that there is a way to die with dignity and to leave so much behind, and that this is part of a journey. This is not the end. And from what I saw, from the way that he passed away, and he really passed on. He didn't die, he passed. And I believe he's on a new adventure. And I believe my sister is too. So I don't know. I think we spend the more time we worry about what happens or about dying, the less time we're really living. So if you focus enough on living, you don't really think about everything else. But he taught me so much about why appearance matters, why we care about how we look. And we're learning more and more that your appearance, and Sandy, your book was so far ahead, talking about skin quality, cleansing the skin, all of those elements of how we take care of our skin. You wrote that years ago, right? How many years now?
Yeah. 6. Yeah.
Years ago. And that conversation is just coming up now, where it's being normalized. And I think that it was kind of a revolutionary idea, but now we're all about the skin biome and what we're doing to eradicate it and why that's so bad. So, so those stories sort of, I think telling stories helps us learn, and that's really important. And that's why I became a writer. But so writing the book for me was being able to share what we go beyond when we look at the skin and why it's not just about appearance. And I learned so much from writing the book. So that's my joy of writing, is that I also learn and get to share.
And you're so right. Like when my journey for writing my book, I learned a ton, and it actually morphed a little bit from just talking about contact dermatitis to sort of cleansing the skin and how we may be damaging it. So on that note, I wanted to sort of, when I was crafting this episode a couple years ago in my head, and I thought of you as a guest, because you do talk a little bit about in your book about sort of the scientific method of injecting. So Marlo and I have had lots of back and forth conversations about this, but the reason I was wanting to talk about the sort of mathematical concept of beauty, which is known as the golden ratio, or phi, which is this mathematical number of 1.618. And part of it is because patients would come in that wanted to have some cosmetic filler, and they would be scared because, like, I don't want to look strange. I don't want to look weird. And what I'm trying to get across in this episode is that the reason people look strange sometimes with filler or Botox, if it's too much and the forehead's falling, is you lose that symmetry ratio. Now, of course, symmetry doesn't always lead to beauty. Some of the most beautiful people aren't symmetric. But when you're injecting somebody, you have to keep that in mind, because if you don't, the cheeks will be too big and the eyes will be too small and the forehead's too low. Yes. And our brain is recognized to see beauty as symmetry, as, shape. And when we don't see that, it looks strange. So your sort of comment on, do you think about that when you're injecting your patients? And
yeah, I think you have to know the math and anatomy so well that you almost don't think about it as the front of mind thought. So when I look at a face and I analyze it, I try to first look for what I think someone's best features are, not what their flaws are. And I think one of the mistakes people make is when they look in the mirror, they immediately go to their flaws, what they don't like. They say, oh, these lines, or the forehead lines, or they point to a flaw, which those flaws are things that we teach them to see. So a lot of it is from the advertising, from the companies that bring these products to market, that teach people to look for specific flaws, and that's what you learn to see. And the second is our own emotional connection to it. So it reminds us of a parent or a relative. And of course, when you're a kid, everybody is old because you're little and they're all big and they're all old. So in your mind, when you start to have those changes, it reminds you of old and mortality and irrelevance and lack of fertility, all of those things that go with it. So for me, or for us as aesthetic physicians who are doing the injections, we need to know about balance, symmetry, phi. And phi for each person is unique in that the measurement between one inner eyelid to the other, that's your basis for your phi. So every part of your face is going to be a fraction or a multiple of that distance. We call that intercanthal. So the inner corner of your left eye to the inner corner of your right eye, that distance is fixed, and that determines where the peak of your brow should be, the forehead length, the mid face, the lower face, the cheek apex, where the light angle should hit. All of those things are important to know.
Yeah.
But we also know that as we change, we have unique ways of changing and commonalities in how we change. So we know that the skeleton shrinks and the soft tissue expands. And left and right sides will do that at different rates because the nerve innervation for left and right sides of our face are different. And so one side will age slower or faster than the other. The side you sleep on, the side of the car you drive on, where you get more sun, all of those things are going to affect it. And then there's always genetics. So we have to take into account how somebody moves, how their skeleton is aging, what their natural balance is. And then one thing I've learned over time, just watching people, is that different parts of your face age at different rates. So your mid face, where your cheeks are, age the slowest. So your cheekbones maintain their bone structure and their anatomy the longest. The lower face ages the fastest. The chin recedes, so lower lip ends up hanging over.
Right.
Because of that, you make upper lip lines. So the mistake of trying to chase the lines is that you'll fill the upper lip lines, but you haven't solved the problem of the receding chin. So now you look more off balance. So reflating is not going to be intuitive.
And that sort of goes back to that, the maintaining those ratios again.
Yes.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I found this so fascinating. And I just want to go back. So one of the concepts in your book, which I absolutely loved, and you give several examples of women coming to see you. You give one specific example of a woman who was divorced and one of her kids was getting married, and she knew she was going to see her husband and his new younger wife and the whole thing. And so she comes to you, and I just love how you have this mind, body, skin connection. And it's not just about, and you're working with women and how they see themselves and trying to understand, really why they're coming to see you, what they're trying to get out of it, and, helping them see themselves differently. I thought that was just so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a big part of what I do. I always find that when people coming in, they're usually coming to or through something. So they're coming in because they either have a big event that can make them happy, or they're going to see that ex who might be there with the younger wife, or, the things that happen. But learning to hold their chin up and see their own beauty and what they have to offer. And sometimes they're lucky, like if that's where that ended up, then boy, did they escape something that wasn't good for them, and they're on to better things. So it's really kind of nice to be able to have that relationship with patients where we can impact their lives in ways that go beyond the injections that we do, where we help them understand their why. Why are you here? Why are you doing this? What does this mean to you? What are you hoping to accomplish with this? And unless we are able to really address that and help them understand it, they can end up missing the point and then unfortunately chasing the lines. So I find that it's really important to get to the understanding of why are you here, what are you trying to accomplish, in order for them to not end up wanting to look overdone, because filling a face isn't going to solve a problem, right?
No.
It's understanding the why.
Yeah. Well, I have to say your patients are so lucky to have you, because I don't think everyone looks at it that way. And, to get that holistic approach and to have someone who's actually interested in what you're maybe going through, what you really want to achieve,
why you're there,
and why you're there is huge. So that's really fascinating and incredible.
So I wanted to sort of change directions a little bit and get into the actual mechanics, into the doing of the aesthetics. And I love your term in your book that you talk about syringe therapy. And for the listeners, a syringe would be like a syringe of filler, or maybe some Botox. So these are sort of things that we're doing in aesthetic medicine. And I love your quote about it's not the product, it's the injector. So an analogy is a piece of textile doesn't become a couture dress. Somebody has to make that. So Do you want to just chat a little bit about that and syringe therapy and your approach?
Sure. I love that we started and you were explaining the outfits you're wearing and dressing up and the fabrics and the designers, right? You had specific ideas in mind and we were celebrating somebody who did quality work. And I think it's the same with syringe therapy is that when you go in for a treatment, whether it's an injectable or a device, the person needs to have the understanding, all the things we talked about, understanding of anatomy and math and phi and left and right side of the face and balance and really reading the lines almost as a story of why are you making this movement that's creating this line? Is it a functional change? Is it an expression? There's so many factors that help us understand that. And the thing is, it doesn't take long for that person to understand the movement. It's a conversation. We'll talk about their children or a pet or a spouse or a friend or a job or something that's going to make them naturally animate. And when you naturally animate, we can see which side of the face is stronger, which is your better side, what your signature features are. Like people sometimes have a little bit of an asymmetry in their smile. And I always give the example of Elvis. He had a crooked smile, but women fainted over that. Like that was his superpower, one of many, besides his amazing voice and his charm. But part of it was that he was not symmetric. Marilyn Monroe, not symmetric. If you made her too left or too right, she wouldn't be as beautiful. So understanding the math, the quality of the injectable, whether we're using a neuromodulator, we have 5 in the US now. We have Xeomin, Dysport, Botox, Daxxify, and Jeuveau. Each one is slightly different. They all can relax muscles and relax wrinkles, but they have their own properties. We have almost 20 different fillers in the US now, and some are softer, some have more firmness. We have what we call rheology. This is the anatomy of the products that will help us understand which part of the face they look best in, whether or not they absorb more or less water, where they should go. And when you use the right product in the right place, in the right way, and the right amount, then you get results that are natural and lasting. And then finally, what I've learned is that products last for different amounts depending on both the product and where it's placed. Under the eye, it can last for decades, like decades. In the mid face, it could last for 5 to 10 years. In the lower face, generally a lot less long. So if you're investing in doing your mid and upper face, you have to understand that there's a commitment to going in more often to do the lower face and chin.
So I guess so my question is, do you have people, I'm assuming you have women who come in and they have done their research and they say, oh, I think Dysport is the right, and I think you should put it here. I mean,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
You get that all the time.
So I'm guessing you're analyzing them, you're seeing them, you're looking, you're making the call of what you're going to recommend. Obviously, that's going to be best.
Because
and will you put different types? So you're saying you do put different types of filler in different areas of the face.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the whole point. Like the people come in with preconceived notions and they're welcome and we listen to them, but it's like saying, you're going to make a simple meal, but it could have all these other things to make it even better. Like you have to understand all the intricacies.
And then do you just have, I'm guessing, people who come in, and it must be hard to just say, okay, what would you recommend?
Yeah.
Right. And then how do you deal with that?
Well, I deal with them in the same way. If somebody has an idea, as you said, I listen and I will take it into account. But if somebody comes in and they go, oh, I don't like this line, the nasolabial fold, from the corner of the nose to the corner of the mouth, I'll understand. But I don't necessarily, they're asking me to fill the line. They're telling me what they see and they're telling me something, but I need to explain to them why it's there. So sometimes you can go directly to that and address it, and we do. But sometimes that line is a reaction to loss away from that line. So it's really a conversation. And either way, it's the same conversation where I'm going to explain to both people what I see in terms of why they are complaining about what they are or why they're even there, of saying, do what we want, because they don't want, like when I go out to eat with my friends, I don't want to look at the menu. I want somebody else to pick. I'll eat anything. So I'm an easy person to eat with.
I have a really cool story. And I love this. Did you guys ever watch Sex and the City?
Yeah.
Of course.
So there's an episode, you may know it, where Samantha goes and she has one specific question to ask the plastic surgeon. And she goes in there and she's sitting there and he takes out his Sharpie pen and he writes all over her, like all this stuff that she had no idea was wrong with her. By the way, that's his impression of what's wrong with her. So I'm very careful when people come in and say, "What would you do?" I say my response back is, "What's bothering you? Let's focus on what's bothering you, and then I can devise a plan around that." But for me to point out somebody's perceived deficiencies, and by the way, they're my perceived deficiencies of them, I think is the wrong approach. And to any of those injectors out there, and if anybody's ever done that to you, I don't think that's a great approach. You have any comments on that?
Well, I usually start by pointing out what I think is their best features. So if it's their
You
eyes,
said
their
that.
bone structure. So I will always start by, because we all have beauty. So my goal is always to take them from beautiful to more beautiful. I try to make a calendar for everybody for a year saying, my goal is to take the beauty you have now, celebrate and enhance it so that over time you continue to look this beautiful. So I never want it to be overwhelming, but I tell them that sometimes it takes more steps to look like you haven't done anything. So when I address all these different areas, it's not because I perceive them as deficiencies. It's because I know that if I keep you in balance as I go, then nobody's going to know that I was there. I said, if I do my job well, I'm invisible and you look better. So I always want to be invisible, but for me to be invisible sometimes takes addressing a lot of areas of your face. So sometimes it's the temples that get a little bit hollowed, but they don't even know to look there. So they complain about someplace far away from the temples, but I know that if I go into the temples along the hairline, I'm going to give them a more unified look to their face. So it's not meant to overwhelm or make them feel like they're not beautiful. It's meant for them to understand that aging is a global change in their face and their neck. And then I need to address areas that they may not know to even notice, but always to understand that it's to celebrate and enhance their beauty, not because they're losing it. And also just to know that beauty changes as you age. Because we're changing, we're going to be beautiful, but it's going to be different. I want it to be balanced.
Yeah. So actually, that leads well into the next question. I know Sandy has her thoughts on this about an age cutoff, really, for Botox and fillers, like concerning for teenagers and young adults. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I definitely think that the idea of doing Botox or a neuromodulator as a preventative at a young age doesn't make sense to me. In my conversations with people, I watch them speak, and if somebody's always furrowing their brows, I'd like to break that cycle of them doing that. So in that sense, it could be preventative. But for somebody who isn't pathologic in their movement, they're not overexpressing in one way. So people come in, they go, I'm so expressive, I have these lines. It's not really that you're so expressive. You're just making one expression for every emotion. And that's not really expressive. It's more lazy. So I'll try to soften that expression, and we chuckle over it, and they get that I'm saying it tongue in cheek. But the idea is to reduce hyper expression in someone at a relatively younger age to help them redirect that movement and teach them to make other movements in the process. So I don't think that it's a good idea to take away expression. I can redirect it gently, but not take it away, because if you can't make an expression, people won't trust you. If people don't know that you're smiling or happy or thinking or anything, then you do become less trustworthy, and you actually lose some of that emotion that goes with it. And I think that they're misguided. So when somebody comes in and they want something I don't think is appropriate, what I try to do is I try to help them understand what they could do instead. So it could be something like a clear, brilliant, a light laser that's going to help with their skin quality, or it could be just using a retinol or more sunscreen or other changes that I think are more appropriate. And sometimes they're a little bit disappointed, but most of the time they're relieved, because I'm not feeding into something that they're hearing, and I'm giving them solid reasons that are scientific behind why, and I'm being supportive, and I'm hearing what they're trying to do. So sometimes it's just fear. that they're going to wake up one day and fall apart if they don't do this, or they're missing this magic silver bullet that's going to protect them from aging. So helping them understand that it isn't that, there isn't such a thing, and that these things are good to do often gives them relief and sort of helps replace their even desire to do it.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there. And I agree. I used to say no to younger people, but I do try to listen to them and do something, even if it's small, and help them. So, because I don't want them to go somewhere else and be overdone.
Right.
So, the next part I wanted to talk about was something else you talk about in your book, which is a blueprint. And I might steal that term. I look at it that way as well. But I had an actress come in a few weeks ago and she wanted more filler. And I said to her, I said, well, when I look at you, I want to I don't do a whole year. I think that's great. But I say, listen, you've got different layers and we have to attack the different layers. She had a lot of photo damage, so a lot of sun damage. And I said, you don't need more filler. You need the texture of your skin to be softened. We can do that with fractionated lasers. Maybe tighten your neck a little bit with skin tightening lasers, which is a different layer. So texture of the skin, tightening of the muscle, filler, they're all different approaches in a blueprint. And I know that that's how you feel. If you wanted to just make a comment on, you sort of have, but your approach.
Yeah, it's helping people understand the pathway towards where they are now and the pathway back towards better quality skin without looking done. And it's exactly as you said, it's a combination approach of using great skincare, great sun protection diet, lifestyle changes. But in the office, it's devices along with the syringe therapy where we're going to improve skin quality along with rebalancing the face, and giving them that blueprint is comforting because they get the whole picture and they have things to look forward to. So they know
Yeah.
what to expect at each visit. They can plan for it both time-wise and financially so that they can feel in control of the process, not just like, I don't know when to go back. I don't know what I'm going in for. I don't know why I'm doing this, but they get the whole story up front. And it's kind of a fun story. So I have people who come in and they're like, oh, I'm up to this one and I see it. And they're so excited and so happy, but we're partners in this. And then it's really respecting that people have their own ideas. So you were asking before about someone coming in and saying, I want this or that. So I had a patient who came in and I was good about listening before I said anything. So in that case, she had an idea. She was in her 70s, but like stunningly beautiful. But she really had such strong asymmetry. One cheek was so much fuller and higher than the other. So I was sure she was going to ask for a balancing of that because it was so obviously asymmetric, like really visible. And when she said, "Oh, I just don't like these marionette lines," I was shocked. I was like, really, that's what you see? I didn't say that, but I said, okay. And then as we were talking, I kind of went into my blueprint and said, well, and I could balance out the cheeks. She goes, well, no, I've always been that way. That's part of my identity. So I kind of felt bad that I had even brought this up. I didn't want to make her sensitive about something that was something that I saw that she might not have minded. So I went out and I discussed about like people's identity and their vision of themselves and be careful, blah, blah, all this stuff. So she comes in a couple months later and she says, I want you to do some filler in my cheek. And I said, why? I just learned so much from you. I changed my whole approach. I'm so careful. And she said, no, you're right. After we did this, I looked at photos and it's always been asymmetric, but I didn't realize how off balance it had become because it happened so slowly over time. So I don't want it to be perfect, but I want it to be closer. So I added a little bit of filler and that brought everything into focus for her. And then those marionette lines didn't bother her at all because her cheek was more closer to balance. So sometimes it takes people time to get there. And I don't think it was bad that I brought it up because she had confidence in her own look and she certainly didn't feel bad about herself when she left. But it helped her kind of see through my lens what we could do to help get her closer to where she was. And it lasted for years and she was just so happy overall. So it's not intuitive. People don't always get what they need. It's our job to gently bring them along. And in her case, it was fine because what she saw, what she asked for was possible to do. But sometimes when people complain about things like forehead lines and they absolutely want them gone, and a neuromodulator is what they think is going to do it, like Botox, then you can erase the lines, but that's a functional movement of holding up your brows. So if you can hold up your brows come down and they make your eyes smaller from above. Then they don't like the hollows they think they have under their eyes. So they get filler under their eyes and they fill their cheeks. So they think they're getting flatter. Now they have smaller eyes from the above, smaller eyes from below because all that product pushes up, and then a big face. And the more filler you do, the further your eyes get from the surface. So now their eyes seem further away and they look like they have small, squinty eyes, big cheeks, low brows. It's not a good look.
Yeah.
And they look alien. And they don't have symmetry.
So Sandy laughs at me because I'm on TikTok quite a bit, but I did see, I think he was a plastic surgeon, just talking about the fact that people are taking out their fillers. I know when we talked before, you said it can be very difficult actually to remove certain fillers.
Yeah. It's nothing, you don't want to put a filler in thinking if I don't like it, I can just take it out. It's important to be thoughtful about it because one, not all fillers are as easily removed as others. Some are easier than others for sure, depending on how they're cross-linked and what their particular structure is and where they're placed. And the other thing is that if you have a filler and then you take out the filler, that makes you feel overly deflated, even though you're back to your baseline. But now your eyes have seen the filler out to here. And if it's down or gone, that contrast can seem more dramatic. And you end up chasing what you think you last were, which is never exactly right. So it's better to be thoughtful and slow and do things in progress than to think I could just take it out.
Right.
Okay, I think that was an amazing discussion, but we're going to sort of end off with non-aesthetic things that we can do. And there's two things I wanted to mention. I love a lot of your quotes in your book. One is by Rumi, and it says, "And you, when will you begin the long journey into yourself?" So I love this study, and I know we chatted about it a little bit in our preparatory talks, but this multi-decade and ethnic study that looked at people that were exceptional agers. So, they looked at all their genetics, their DNA, and they sort of classified these methuselah genes that after a biblical person who lived a long time, and they basically protected people from the sun. So people that were exceptional agers, a lot of it's genetics, but then they did a subsequent study that looked at behavioral lifestyle things. And so then the conclusion was that, the exceptional agers did well because of their genetics. But the other thing that played a big role was sunscreen, positive attitudes towards themselves, regular exercise, and 8 hours of sleeping. So I know you talk about this in your book, and I know you live it. What do you sort of do with respect to your lifestyle to keep yourself looking as beautiful as you do?
Oh, thank you. I tried. It's always a work in progress, right? So I value sleep. When I go to meetings, I'm famous for missing all the evening events because I'd much rather be in my room reading a book, listening to music, talking to my husband and kids and grandkids, and just going to sleep, especially if I'm in a different time zone. I definitely limit alcohol to little to no alcohol. I don't much enjoy it, but on a Friday night, I'll have a little tequila. It's my main drink that I drink. I think it's the best of all the alcohols if you're going to drink alcohol. So tequila is my drink. And I do meditations. So I'm not as rigid about it where it's a certain time every day, but I listen to Sam Harris a lot, and I do a lot of the guided meditations and yoga nidras that are really helpful. Weightlifting, I have a Peloton. So exercise has always been important. My dad always had us exercise and be athletic. And then diet I'm working on. But I am a meat eater. I think meat is really important for health, especially as you get older. It's a very great source of protein, but it should be good quality meat.
Right. And can you talk to us about any supplements you take? Do you take collagen? Because I know can be a bit controversial. I'm not sure if it really does that much. And, with Sandy, we've talked about adaptogens. So I don't know if you want to maybe explain exactly what adaptogens are.
Yeah, so I think of adaptogens as substances you can take that help you respond to a stress or not react as strongly to a stress. So a stress adaptogen would be sometimes an anti-inflammatory or certain antioxidants that you could take. I go to a functional medicine doctor, so I'm huge on hormone replacement. I think that it's malpractice to not have the conversation with women about it as they enter perimenopause, before menopause. Not saying it's for everyone, but the conversation is for everyone. And women are very misinformed. Women worry so much about breast cancer, but your chances of dying of heart disease, I think, are up to 10 times higher than dying of breast cancer. So I think we're worrying in the wrong category. And hormone replacement can help with that, as well as dementia, osteoporosis, and collagen breakdown. Collagen supplements are controversial because we love to talk about evidence-based medicine, but they're a supplement. And collagen is a protein. So I think of it as a very specific protein. And I've seen enough studies that give me at least enough of a hypothetical, theoretical value to it that I think that there is some value, but you don't want to overdo it because it can be a heavy protein and it could be bad for the kidneys if you have a kidney problem.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I don't know if people understand when you said evidence-based and you talk about the fact that it's a supplement. So from what I understand, it means that the funding isn't going into it because
it's not
can
a
you
drug.
just explain that?
So
It's not a drug.
So
it's not a drug.
If you have a drug, you have to go through an FDA approval process where you have to have placebo-controlled blinded studies. If you're looking at a supplement, whether these are vitamin C or vitamin D or these supplements that are available without a prescription, then they don't make the same claims and they don't have to go through the same process for FDA approval. And that process is really costly. And if you don't sell something that's going to be exclusive and the whole class is going to benefit from it, no one's going to invest in that way. But I think there are a few companies that do pretty good research and make enough of an explanation. And I think there is more data coming out as to why hydrolyzed collagen, if it's produced correctly, and I think the marine collagen is the best that's made from fish scales, tends to break down as you digest it. So the problem with collagen is that it's a protein. So when you eat a protein, and I think eating it or drinking it is the best way to get it, then obviously you're going to digest it. It's going to get broken down by the enzymes in your stomach and your intestines. So of course you're not going to take collagen and think it's going to go in as collagen. But the protein that it breaks down to, the building blocks it breaks down to, I believe can support bone, joint, and skin health. So I think that there's some value.
And one more thing, you also, when we spoke before, you mentioned the diabetes drug.
Right. So then there's a whole bunch of other ones that I take. So metformin is a big one that I was taking it for about 15 years. I covered it on the news a while ago as like the anti-aging drug that costs pennies. And people have strong opinions about that drug, but I think it's one of the best, most inexpensive meds. And again, it's generic. So now there's a couple of clinical trials going on around longevity. And because humans live for a relatively long period of time, doing a longevity study can take decades. And you need a ton of people to actually get to data that's not just noise or irrelevant. So to get to that level of quality where you can say the drug is making a difference, it's going to take years. But I don't have that many years to sort of wait for them to figure it out. So metformin, there's a study called the TAME study that's ongoing. I believe it's already started. So we'll see what they say. But I think that there's value to it. And I think resistance is the problem.
Right.
Yeah, I started taking it after I discussed it with you. I mean, I have high blood pressure and heart disease and high cholesterol, so I've been taking it. We are way over time, just because the conversation was so amazing. So we're just going to wrap it up there, and we want to thank you so much for your time and insight. It was amazing, and your book.
Please pick up Dr. Day's book, Beyond Beautiful: Using the Power of Your Mind and Aesthetic Breakthroughs to Look Naturally Young and Radiant.
So thank you so much, Doris, for joining us. Your insights are wonderful, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was so great being on with you both. Mwah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Catch us every Thursday for a fresh, exclusive dose of Skin to It. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on the skincare wisdom. We will guide you through the maze of skincare and cut through that noise to help you achieve your healthiest skin. Loving our podcast? Share your thoughts and help us grow by leaving a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until we meet again, see you soon on Skin to It, your guide to healthy skin. Skin to It, a podcast brought to you by Bioderma.